The world is on the cusp of a very precarious time where we have a very polarized world in so many different respects, from vax to anti-vax, from vegan to non-vegan, to, gender challenges and religious challenges and political challenges. And there's so much conflict and difference in the world right now that's being heightened and exacerbated and potentially moving us closer and closer to major conflict. And the external world really is a representative of our collective internal world. It's an expression of what we're feeling within ourselves, our own conflict. One of the biggest problems we have on the planet is we have around 7 billion people out of the 7.8 billion people that are disconnected to their true self.
Tom, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Great hanging out with you.
Yeah, good having you. You're an author, public speaker, and meditation teacher, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess to start off with is your upbringing. I would love to talk about your upbringing and ask you about how you were raised, your beliefs, and your religion. Or were you religious or not raised with religion?
Yeah, I was brought up in a very strong Catholic household. On a country farm, family of 7, mum and dad and 5 of us kids. And, we went to church every week for Mass on Sundays. We did grace every night before dinner. During Lent, we would, for those that are familiar with Catholicism, we would, through Lent, do the rosary every night. We would go to the church for confession. So, every room in the house pretty much has a crucifix of Jesus in it and icons of Mary. And, it was a very strong religion and, or a strong, connection to that faith and that religion when we were kids. And I think that was kind of like developed and established a strong connection with something higher in me that eventually evolved and grew from that over time. But I had a very strong, I remember as a child, I prayed a lot and I had a strong communication with, at the time, with Jesus and God. And Mum was always, I used to pray a lot to win things like raffles at school. And I kept winning them and I kept finding myself getting these seemingly prayers answered a lot, which really re-emphasized and reinforced my faith as a child.
One of the profound parts of your story I love is when you get in your 20s. When you get into your 20s, you start to talk about having like depression, anxiety. You even talk about addiction. And I used to be an alcoholic, so I love talking about addiction. Would you like to touch on that?
Yeah, it's really, I look at my life in sort of 3 phases. And one was the time when I was with a strong faith in God and had a strong religious upbringing. And then I have this window of time, it's like a 10-year decade, 1 decade, 10 years, where I was really deep in hedonism and as a result of that, narcissism. I think they go hand in hand. Self-importance. I was a broker in finance and got into a lot of addiction into drugs and drinking. And that was a time when was my darkest and bleakest time as well. And then after that, I found meditation, which we can explore in a moment. But that time when I was into a lot of drugs and drinking correlates to being also my most unhappiest time. And I think it's really interesting. There's a correlation in our world between societies that are really deep in addiction. And when we say addiction, it doesn't mean you have to have an alcoholic addiction or a drug addiction. It can be Instagram, it can be TikTok, it can be ice cream. What we're looking at here is addiction to forms, phenomenons, as a source of fulfillment, a way of seeking pleasure, a way of trying to extract pleasure. It could be gambling. And what we're doing is we're disconnecting from our higher self. And some might call that God. Some might call it spirituality, the divine, whatever you want to call it. But there's usually a correlation, and it certainly was in my life. The time when I was most attracted and most pulled into the external world where I was seeking happiness and fulfillment, which is where I was getting addictions, was when I was at the most bleakest and most unhealthiest, most unhappiest, riddled with anxiety. So, that was something in my sort of from 19 to 29 that I experienced 10 years of that.
Do you believe we live in a system that's kind of helped creating addiction?
100%. Yeah, I think the system, part of it is our own weaknesses that helps facilitate that system's growth. Someone can say, here's TikTok. It's up to you whether you want to get addicted to it. TikTok is designed for addiction. The algorithms are designed for addiction to keep you hooked into it. Even the head of Netflix at one point in their annual general meeting, and I may be wrong on this, but I was told that this is true, said that they have 3 main competitors at Netflix. They have YouTube, Facebook, and sleep. And they're finding that sleep was a competitor because it was meaning that people had their eyes closed and weren't on Netflix. And so our system is designed for addiction, but I think also in our weakness, we're easily addicted. So there's 2 things at play there.
A lot of times, like Gabor Mate and a lot of research is showing us that they're talking about trauma, linking trauma with addiction. And I like what he says, trauma means wound. These inner wounds, psychological and emotional wounds that we develop with the inability to process, our emotions and so on, or coping skills. And did you find yourself having some kind of emotional pain, loss of self? Because I also love how Dr. Peter Levine talks about trauma is the loss of self.
Yeah, look, it's a really sensitive area to talk about trauma because there's a lot of very deeply wounded people from very traumatic experiences. And, I can't speak of, from a place of authority that much. I didn't really have an abusive, horrible, traumatic childhood. I had a very good upbringing. I don't think I can speak authentically about trauma, I believe, in a qualified way because I haven't been through it. So I don't know what it's like for someone to have gone to war or been raped or, some of the stuff that's going on in the world right now will lead to a lot of trauma. So I don't want to come across an authority, but I do believe and do see correlation between people that are deeply wounded from a very traumatic experience. When they become connected to that self, when they become connected to that part of them, and when we say part of them that already exists, it's their higher self, their spirit, their soul, God, source, the divine. We can use a number of different words to describe that. What happens is there's a deeper sense of solace. There's a deeper sense of inner peace. There's a deeper sense of freedom from the binding effect of that trauma, because we want to see that one of the qualities of, let's just call it the divine, which is an omnipresent field of, let's call it spirituality, it doesn't have trauma in it. So the trauma is in us, it's in our ego, it's in our identity, and it's in the body. There's no question, it's also in the body. And we do need to do some somatic body work to help clear that trauma out of the body, because that's the warehouse where it's stored. But when we start to also connect into our higher self, where there's actually trauma can't even exist in that. It's like the clouds might be in the sky, but the sky isn't the clouds. And so there's a distinct difference between there's clouds which have a particular shape and texture to them that exist within the sky, but they're not the sky. And we've got to start realizing that we do have the clouds, but we're not the clouds, we're the sky, which is the divine field, the divine essence.
So how did you get out of the depression or addiction or that dark place you were in?
And interesting you mentioned depression and addiction, because quite often those two things go together. Depression can drive addiction and addiction can drive depression. Those two things actually work very closely, like brother and sister, or, mother and father, they kind of go together. Depression can drive addiction. And I was in a sympathetic nerve. I was just stressed. And that is, I was in hyper, the nervous system state that is a very stressed state, the sympathetic nervous system. And when we're in the sympathetic nervous system state, we have high levels of cortisol and adrenaline. So if someone's in war for a long period of time, they're on the front line, or even someone that works in the front line, like paramedics or police or firemen that are constantly in positions that pushes them into the sympathetic nervous system because they're in, survival mode, then we're producing high levels of cortisol, high levels of adrenaline, but we're not going to produce the levels of oxytocin and serotonin, the biochemicals, to make us feel happy. So what happens is we have high levels of cortisol and adrenaline, very low levels of serotonin and oxytocin, because they don't coexist. And then what happens as a result of that, now we get depressed. Now, because we're depressed, we go looking for things that might make us feel better. And so then we go to the drugs, the gambling, the sex, the drinking, whatever it is that makes us feel a little bit better than what we were feeling before, because we just weren't feeling good. So the depression can drive addiction, or we can just start moving into addiction because it's just fun hanging out doing lines of coke or something, or we can, all of our mates are doing crack or ice or something, and next thing we're down that pathway because that's what our, society that we were sort of growing up in was doing. And that addiction can then drive depression. And then what happens is, because it's harder and harder to find the levels of high that you were getting without that, and so therefore you have to keep going back to that device, that mechanism that's going to give you that high. So yeah, for me, the depression and addiction in my 20s, it did exacerbate and get more and more severe as time went on. And that led eventually to a nervous breakdown in my late 20s. And that looked like extreme anxiety, extreme panic attacks, agoraphobia, that's the inability to leave the house, a very bleak depression where I was in a very dark place, not really even questioning whether I want to go on with life. And then using a lot of drugs and drinking, trying to, and was managing to look on the outside like I was coping, but that all blew up in my late 20s one day when it was a full-blown nervous breakdown. I was a bit of an emotional wreck, quite uncontrollable. And at that point, I was seeing doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, put on pharmaceuticals. There was something innately within me that knew there was another alternative to that. And this is not to discourage anyone that is using that pathway. It's just that for me, I felt that there was something more that I was missing. There just seemed like there was a missing piece in the jigsaw, and that this wasn't really the ultimate way for me to fulfill my life by seeing psychologists, psychiatrists, and put on medication. And the universe organized it that I would find meditation at that point in time, particularly a deep style of meditation called transcendental meditation. And that was like a light bulb moment. It was like a very strong epiphany appeared and emerged in me that what I was looking for wasn't outside of me. What I was looking for was inside of me. And I was distracted all these years. And this was a tool, a portal to a particular destination that existed within me. I didn't know it was there because I was so busy looking out there. And I was looking for things outside of me that were going to provide fulfillment. But this meditation allowed me to look inward. And what I found there was serenity. What I found there was peace. And what I found there was fulfillment. And all those addictions, they literally just melted away very quickly. And as well as that, so did the anomalies, which was the anxiety, the panic attacks, the depression, the agoraphobia. And then I went back into work and I went back to hanging out with the same mates and the same people, but just doing it on my terms. So I became more sovereign now. And I started to walk my path and my life, even in that environment. And I worked in that industry for another 16 more years without doing all the drugs and the drinking, and became very successful. And this is one of the great, I guess, examples of how we don't have to be swayed by the pack. We can be, direct our own path in life and find our own sovereignty and our own empowerment. And that was a big thing for me. That's how I managed to get out of it all.
I love how you said it started to melt. Your addictions started to melt. And that was kind of my experience in my alcoholism. It started to melt away. And next thing you know, I learned how to retrain my mind and body to live in the present moment when I couldn't do that before.
It's very powerful. If just on that, it's one of the things that motivates me the most is that no one's excluded from that. You've been through it and found peace. I've been through it and found peace. And anyone that's listening that's struggling right now, I want you to know that it might be hard for you right now. It might be very difficult. But no one does not have that within them. It's just a matter of, have we got the tools, the techniques, the guidance, the support, and the know-how to connect to that part of us. And that's the beautiful thing, and what motivates me, and no doubt you as well, is how can we get as many people to find that part of them that is already in peace.
Are there different forms of meditation that you teach? Or
Yeah, there's so many different forms of meditation. Yeah, look, I predominantly have a core meditation practice that I teach and use, and that's a transcending style of meditation. There's visualization meditations, guided meditations, gratitude meditations, chakra healing meditations, and they're all beautiful, and they all have a place in our lives. But what I find is critical and very important is that we go into a deep, what I call transcendent experience. Transcend means to go beyond. And when we go beyond, what that means is to go beyond the thinking mind, beyond the feeling body, that's your emotions, and beyond your physical body, which is the locality of where you currently occupy. When we transcend those 3 dimensions or 3 layers, what happens is that we access a part of us that is unshakable, unmovable, and unruffable. And it's very solid. It's very solid, not as in physical solid. Solid as in it's grounded. It's stable. It's consistent. It's unmovable. And the beautiful thing about it is it's eternal as well. And so when we connect to that part of us that is experiential, my meditation students come out of their meditation, even in the first weekend, and go, wow, like that was amazing. Like that felt so deep and so peaceful and so quiet. And I'm like, that's you. And that was always there. It's just that now you're starting to discover it. And when we start to have a practice that takes us into that realm and do that regularly and consistently, it's like having a foundation of a house. If you think of a house that doesn't have a foundation, or a tree that doesn't have roots, it's very unstable. The slightest little thing can topple it over. But what happens with this meditation, particularly if we incorporate it and integrate it on a daily basis, and I recommend twice a day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, is that we dive consistently into that and we build that foundation of our life on that stability, which gives us a greater footing to go into the world, which is very uncertain and very, unstable.
So you meditate about 15, 20 minutes a day?
Yeah, 20 minutes morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon. It's pretty structured. The simplicity of that is that, I know my day has 24 hours in it, and I know that each hour has 3 blocks of 20 minutes in it, which means that I have 72 20-minute portions of time in my day that are allocated to finding fulfillment, whether it's sleeping or eating or going to the toilet or going to the movies, going to the gym, cleaning the bathroom floor, and going to do the grocery shopping. I know that if I park 2 of those 72 20-minute segments out of my day into sitting in my chair with my eyes closed, and that could be a parked car, it could be a park bench, it could be my sofa at home. It doesn't really matter where. There's no real emphasis on where I do it. It's just, can I find 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon to connect with that part of me that is unruffable, unshakable, and also blissful and joyful and loving as well. Then that becomes part of your reality over time.
The Dalai Lama once said, and I'm paraphrasing him, he says, if every 8-year-old would learn meditation, all the violence in the world will be gone by the next generation. And then your book, The Portal, it says how meditation will save the world. Would you like to touch on that?
We're in a very conflicted time right now. For anyone that might be listening into this in future, weeks, months, years, this is October 2023. And the world is on the cusp of a very precarious time where we have a very polarized world in so many different respects, from vax to anti-vax, from vegan to non-vegan to, gender challenges and religious challenges and political challenges. And there's so much conflict and difference in the world right now that's being heightened and exacerbated and potentially moving us closer and closer to major, major conflict. And the external world really is a representative of our collective internal world. It's an expression of what we're feeling within ourselves, our own conflict. One of the biggest problems we have on the planet is we have around 7 billion people out of the 7.8 billion people that are disconnected to their true self, and disconnected from that unified field. And that field is a subtle field. It's not a field of form that has textures and colors and shapes and ideologies in it. It's a field that is non-changing. It's a field that's pervasive of all reality. It's the field that unites and connects us. It's the string that binds us. It's like the thread of the pearls in a pearl necklace that makes those pearls all be together. And that unified field, some would call it God or source or the divine. I don't like to use the word God because it's so polarized and charged at the moment. Many people believing that their God's better than someone else's God. But let's just call it a unified field, in a quantum field, quantum science sort of understanding of things. If we can get the world realizing that nature, that true essence of them, they'll realize that every part of everything is interconnected, interwoven, and part of a unified field and part of one thing. So my hand can't pick up a hammer and hit my toe because my whole body will feel that pain. And this is what we're feeling, is our internal pain is expressing itself in external pain, and we need to start really getting what I believe, getting the world meditating.
Do you think it's our forgetfulness of our oneness that's creating ignorance and suffering?
And absolutely, that's what it is. Ignorance is not a disparaging, judgmental viewpoint. It's an observation that we are ignoring our true nature, and that's because we're highly distracted. We're an easily distracted species. We're an animal, and if you take a cow, and a cow knows inherently to eat grass. You know, the mother doesn't take the calves to eating grass school and teach them to eat grass. They just know by default that that's good for them and that's what they should do. However, if you take a sugar block, a big block of sugar, and put it on a table in the middle of a paddock that is filled with lush green grass, because that sugar block is greater, provides greater pleasure, won't be long before those cows will spend their entire day licking that sugar block, and doing something that becomes unhealthy for them. And we as an animal, as a species of animals, still have that tendency to gravitate towards things that are highly pleasurable, even though we know that they're not good for us. And that's what distraction is. That's why we gravitate towards ice cream and KFC and TikTok and all the things that distract us in life. And we're not interested at this point in time, generally as a species, like I wasn't, until there's a major pain point or crisis, to look within and look into that inner silence and stillness that is deeper than the distraction outside of us.
Do you think we're having a collective awakening right now?
It's kind of like the universe is interesting. I didn't know this until I talked to a physicist about this. He was saying that there's some parts of the universe is still expanding outward, and some parts of it is already moving, contracting inward. And so it's almost like the torus. Some's going out, some's going in. I think there's some aspects of the collective that is going through an awakening. And I think there's some aspects of it that's going into more and more degrees of being asleep, which leads, of course, to more and more pain and suffering. I think it's all evolution. It's just that evolution takes on various shapes and forms. And I think sometimes we have to go through a really bleak, dark, horrible time to get to a more, more harmonious time. And the analogy I like to use is if we're renovating a house, we're taking an old home that looks in okay shape. You know, it's functional. The kitchen works, the bathroom works. It's 40, 50, 60, 80 years old. But I want to really revamp this, and I want to evolve the house. I want to make the house better. So I bring in the tradesman, and I'm ripping out the kitchen, I'm ripping out the bathroom, I'm ripping up the floorboards and taking off the wallpaper and the curtains. Now, if you were to take that house mid-renovation, you would clearly say that I've made this house worse, to the point where it's actually gone from being livable to being completely unlivable. And that's kind of where we're going with the planet. It's almost unlivable. But maybe that's just part of a sequential process of evolution that we have to go through for our awakening, for our evolution, and that we shouldn't judge the renovation midway through it. The problem with where we're at as a species is that we can't clearly see what's on the horizon yet because we're not looking there. I can see it, and I can see the potential for it. But with the renovation of the house, if we had the capacity to look at the architect's 3D plans of what the future version of that house is looking like, we wouldn't have any fear. We wouldn't have any concern. It's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so amazing. I can't wait till the final product. This looks incredible. I can't believe this render that you're showing me. It's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I think the only problem that we're facing is that we don't have a 3D render of what the future version of the planet looks like, because no one's creating it, no one's designing it, no one's giving us the probability, the possibility of going there, because we don't know what it looks like and we don't have that roadmap to get there, which is unfortunate. We really need, rather than political bodies like the World Health Organization or the CDC or the FDA or the UN or the WEF and all the anagrams that we've got out there that are trying to support or supposedly direct humans, maybe we need another body that is one that's in charge of creating an enlightened planet. Maybe you should start that.
I think Ann Williamson's trying to start something like that.
Well, the problem is, and Marianne's beautiful. I have met Marianne. She signed a copy of our book actually at one point, and she has a great vision. And where we are now is an exciting place, because we're a lot further than where we were 200 years ago. If you talked like Marianne did 200 years ago, you probably got burnt at the stake or crucified or something radical like that has pretty much happened for saints, sages and prophets that tried to forecast much better times ahead. Traditionally, they normally got assassinated, crucified or suppressed or incarcerated. The Mandelas, the Gandhis, the Christs, the Kennedys, the Lennons. But we're getting to a really interesting time. Marianne's able to talk about these things in a political forum, which is quite amazing. I've seen her on stage in front of large audiences. And what she's saying is very profound, but I think she's still probably a little bit too early for the collective consciousness to be quite yet there to see her get elected into a country. But it's interesting that we've got someone like that at least running for a presidency, and having the ability to express her views and not get completely annihilated, which is quite interesting times.
Yeah, she has a beautiful book called Politics of Love.
I've got the book.
And that's the one thing, like having an awakening or whatever you want to call it. Like I feel like for me is like I'm not attached to a box or a collective belief system. I'm actually out of those boxes, it feels like. And I could see the world for what it really is and really try to be more helpful for humanity and be part of the solution, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of people at the moment, and it's easy to do this on social media. What do we call them? The keyboard warriors that hide behind accounts that aren't public, they don't have their profile, they don't have their bio, they don't have their website, and they'll just be, slandering people all the time from that safety of anonymity. What we need now is less criticism. What we need is proactive solutions to the current problems, and how do we move us forward? What are the things that we can do to move humanity forward? And usually the people that did that traditionally in the past were the ones, again, that got crucified, assassinated, or suppressed. But what we need are more problem solvers and more people with solutions to help uplift and bring a better experience for all of humanity and the planet as a whole. That's the animals and the plants as well.
What's the difference for you? Or is there a difference at all between spirituality and religion?
And again, this is something that I'm always open to everyone's viewpoint and welcoming everyone's viewpoint without any criticism. Everyone has the right to have their own understanding and appreciation of certain things. And so I'm open to discussions if people struggle with my viewpoint on this. I see, for me personally anyway, this is my personal experience. Religion for me was like, when you're in a bowling alley and when you're little, you're still struggling a bit. So they put the barriers up on the side to help the ball get down. There's that analogy, or there's the training wheels on the bike. And the training wheels or the bowling barriers, they play a role in helping facilitate something. Let's just use the training wheels for now. So the training wheels play a role by helping you learn and develop your skill set in being a good bike rider. And they're integral to help you, to stop you getting injured and hurting yourself. So they play a role and we need them. But if we get attached to them and we don't let go of them, then what happens is they actually become a conundrum, because now that you're a very skilled and experienced bike rider, if you leave those training wheels on and you try to ride fast, they're actually going to get in the way, particularly if you're going to take a corner. They're going to make a whole mess of things. They're going to actually hurt you. And these are the things that stopped you getting hurt, and now the thing that they're going to make you get hurt. And I see that that's kind of where we're at now with religion, is that religion played a role in creating a container for us to start to develop a sense of God, a sense of a higher self, a sense of some divine, celestial, non-form, sort of conscious field of maternal intelligence. But at some point, we have to let go of those training wheels, because now what we're seeing is those training wheels, those structures are the things that are causing all the mayhem on the planet right now for many, many people in so many different ways. And we can trace nearly, not all, but nearly all conflict on the planet back to some religious indoctrination of my way is better than your way. And if I can annihilate your way, then my way will remain supreme, and then I'm going to feel better off. And it's getting to the point where we have to evolve into a less structured form of connection to a higher thing. And I don't think it's an accident that 99% of the world subscribe to either religion or some spiritual belief. So if you're not religious, then at least there's some meditation, even tribal cultures subscribe to some higher thing. And I don't think it's an accident. It's because we know at a quantum level that exists. There's this intelligence that's not solid, down to the quark and leptoquark levels. We've got this wonderful mystical journey of ancient mystics, and we've got quantum physics starting to converge at the same time. So now it's about giving people not just a conceptual idea that there's this, structured form that I need to exist in, like a church with priests or, monks or whatever it is that our religion has as the structure to it. We want to start connecting to an experience of that higher self that becomes a profound internal state that unites us to others, and we start to see that unity inside ourselves and in others. And I think that's where we'll lose a lot of that boundary and separation that we've got on the planet, because that boundary and separation that we've got is where we've got all the conflict and divide. And spirituality, there's no boundaries there. There's no division. There's no separateness. There's no ideology. And religion has ideology. It has beliefs. It has concepts. It has rules and regulations. Spirituality doesn't have that. And spirituality is experienced. It's not structured. And I think that's the big difference. One's structured, one's not structured. One's beliefs, one's experiences.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, every religion shares the same spiritual principles, but the belief systems is what creates the division. It seems like the us against them mentality.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say I belong to my spirituality, you belong to your spirituality. It's you can't say there's a separation there. Whereas I can say I belong to my religion and you belong to your religion, and there's clearly a separation there. And that's based upon the name of your church, the name of the people that work in your church, the name of the type of rules and regulations you have in when your church started, when your religion started. All that sort of stuff is limits to something that is limitless. And as humans, I think we're getting to this really exciting point of evolving beyond not necessarily the need for those religions, but certainly our ability to evolve beyond the limits of those religions, for sure.
The label consciousness. Has meditation helped you dissolve those labels and identities?
It's funny.
Oh, go ahead.
My mother, she's a beautiful human, the matriarch of our family, and she was having anxiety at one point in her life, and hopefully Mum won't mind me saying this. She's still with us and a beautiful human, but she was having anxiety with us at one point, and at that stage she was a devout Catholic and going off to Mass every week. And I said, look, I've found this meditation, it's really powerful. It helped me calm my mind and my nervous system and heal from that anxiety. That anxiety started to melt away and the depression melted away, and maybe you should try this meditation. She goes, look, I'll try it if I can still have Jesus and Mary in my life and still go to church and have my faith. And I said, yeah, absolutely, it'll deepen that. So she started meditating, and it was quite a few years that she'd been meditating, and she'd meditate every day. And then one day I was down at the farm and I got out of bed and went up to Sunday morning, get my breakfast, and Mum was in the house. I said, Mum, it's Sunday morning. What are you doing here? Why aren't you at church? She said, I don't need to go to a building to find God. God's with me everywhere. And I was like, holy moly, like what's happened here? And it really was a beautiful example of acknowledging the beauty of the church and the building and the structure and the religion and all that sort of stuff, but knowing that it's not limited to that, and it's not contained within that vessel, that it's beyond that. And that definitely is what meditation has done for me, because it's become experiential now. It's become an experience that happens when we transcend beyond my thinking mind, beyond my physical form, beyond the locality of my own concepts and beliefs and structures. And it becomes a pervasive, unified field that I'm experiencing. So it's almost like the analogy I use is the wave becomes the ocean. And even though it becomes the ocean, it always was the ocean and always will be the ocean, whether it's a wave or not. It's just that now as a wave, it's going, oh, I'm a wave and I'm the ocean. So I'm a human and I'm also part of that omnipresent field of divinity.
It's kind of like enlightenment for the wave is a realization you are water, not the wave. And that illusion of separateness starts to dissolve. I think that's what Jesus meant when he said, I and my Father are one.
Absolutely. There's so much spirituality in Jesus' teachings. It's phenomenal. Even reincarnation. You can go to Google and just type in reincarnation Bible. In the Council of Constantinople in 600 AD, and there was a big meeting. They extracted a lot of references to reincarnation and a lot of the spiritual references because they didn't like the idea that people felt that they could come back and take another go at things. But Jesus referred to a lot of things that were very spiritual. He would say, be still and know that I'm God. Talked about oneness a lot, talked about the one. And it's what I found even interesting, and some Christians and Catholics might struggle with what I'm about to say. But it's worth doing their own research. At least, hopefully, it inspires some level of intrigue and curiosity. But it's fascinating that the years of Jesus' life from the age of 12 to 30 are completely void in the Bible. There is no reference and no recollection, no dialogue of his existence between the age of 12 and 30. So that's 18 years of his life is missing. And if you go to northern India, there's a lot of books and a lot of research, and you can go to Google and do your own research, that reveals that he did travel to the east and spent some time. Now, I don't know if he did or not. Of course, I'm not an expert in this and I can't validate or testify to that. But I find it interesting that that research is coming out saying that he spent some time studying a lot of Eastern philosophy and a lot of meditation practices in the East. And then when he went back, that's when he started to develop a lot more of his superhuman capabilities, which a lot of us have, these superhuman capabilities, just that we haven't spent much time exploring them or harnessing them yet.
I appreciate you bringing that up. The lost years, they call them, right?
And, missing years of Jesus Christ, yeah.
My friend Suzanne Olsen, she passed away, but she wrote a book called Jesus in Kashmir. And she shows a lot. She had a lot. Yeah, Jesus in Kashmir. Is it available? Yeah, it's available. She recently passed away a couple years ago. I found out. But yeah, she was a really good person. She even did a documentary on it with the government of India, because the disciple Thomas is over there.
Wow.
But yeah, I appreciate that. The lost years of Jesus. Going back to meditation, for a beginner, what kind of advice would you give, people that you teach your students about, starting off in meditation with that monkey mind?
Yeah, meditation can be really hard if we don't know how to do it, or we have a technique of meditation that isn't really suitable for our particular mind. There's so many different styles of meditation: gratitude, visualization, like I said, chakra clearing. I found and tried them all and found them very, very difficult when I had a pretty crazy mind. So most meditations aren't going to be suitable for someone with a very, very busy mind, because the nature of the mind is it doesn't want to be still. It doesn't want to be shaped. It doesn't want to be contained. It's like a wild bucking bronco that has free rein to go and do whatever it wants. And then all of a sudden you try and put a saddle on it. It's not going to be happy with that. And it needs a lot of reining and roping in. So I find that wild bucking bronco, if we put a carrot in front of it, it will become very calm and very still very quickly. And that's because it has something that is inspiring and enticing it to be still. And so that's where the mantra comes in. So what I recommend to people, what I found for me anyway, and this is by no means something that they should do, just do your own research. Find a technique that works for you. Find a teacher that you resonate with. There's so many different ways you can go to calming the mind and getting into those deeper states of meditation. What I do find, and what worked for me, was transcendental meditation or Vedic meditation or primordial sound technique. Those three styles of meditation all use the same process, which is using a mantra, which is a mind vehicle, a resonance that has this beautiful quality about it that makes your meditation very easy and accessible. And now the mind is entertained and lured into the deeper quietness through the charm and the intrigue and curiosity of the resonance of that sound. And these mantras were cognized by ancient seers thousands of years ago, way before Jesus' time. And monks and sages and pundits and enlightened beings have been using this technique for thousands of years, and it stood the test of time. And the beautiful and exciting thing about this is that it's emerging into the mainstream now, and it's doing that because it works. It's effective, it's powerful, and it's efficient. So just looking in your area, trying to find a teacher that teaches transcendental meditation, Vedic meditation, primordial sound technique. If they can't find that, then reach out to me on Instagram or my website, tomcronin.com, Instagram, Tom Cronin, and I've got some programs that I can share with you that might be able to help you with that process.
Going back to that verse, be still, know I am God. How do you define, how does that look when someone experiences the non-dualistic to someone that's stuck in duality, deeply entrenched in duality?
I love your questions. Let's just describe what duality is first, and then we'll look at what non-duality is. It's hard to look at non-duality until we really understand what duality is. Duality is what we call in science subject-object phenomenon, where there's relativity between me, the subject, which is the viewer of life. So you are the observer, and you observe life through your physical, mental, and emotional form. You are here, and you're observing that. Now that, what we're talking about, is the object, which is the place where your attention lands. So now we have two things: subject, you, the observer, and that which is being observed, which is the object of your attention. Now the object of your attention will be future, past, or present. So at the moment, the object of your attention, anyone listening, is present because you're listening to my words. But when you get off this podcast and let's just say you're in bed tonight and you're lying with your head on your pillow and you're worrying about whether your finances are going to be able to cover your needs because mortgage rates are rising, and now you're in a bit of panic, and we've got inflation and your job's under pressure, and now the place of your attention, whilst you're in bed with your head on that nice soft pillow, is in a future dynamic, a future scenario. And we still have subject and object, that's duality. And what is happening is it's the relationship between the two, which is the dynamic, which is the energetic, vibrational status that you are feeling caused by the object in the subject. And that object, which is where we're putting our attention, it could be now you're listening to Spotify, then you're watching Netflix, then you're eating an ice cream, then you're remembering something really painful and annoying that happened yesterday when you had an argument with a friend of yours. There's this dynamic that is your feeling body that is the cause of your attention. And that's duality. Okay, we're always in duality as long as there's subject and object. Now, non-duality is where the dynamic charge between the subject and object is melted because there's no longer the subject and the object. Okay, now what happens is there's just presence. And that can happen in deep meditation where we're not thinking and we're not observing, we're just being. And with an advanced state, what happens is that state of being becomes stabilized whilst we're in the world of being engaged with the outside world. And being becomes ever present and it's unruffable. And so now we're in non-duality, even though we're in the world of interaction. It's very rare that we have truly established non-duality in this current world, because traditionally people in that state of non-duality usually only lived in caves, ashrams, and monasteries. It was very hard to raise teenagers or deal with a job and have deadlines and have to get on airplanes and, you know, cover your mortgages and in a state of non-duality. This is a very early stage of non-dualists living in the world as householders. So we're just sort of trying to work out what that looks like and how we behave as non-dualists in this world. What it looks like, just to give people an understanding, just to give them a sort of grasp of the feeling of what it feels like. What it feels like is an equanimity, something that's inside you that just doesn't change. It's there all the time. And there's a deep quietness that exists in your mind, and there's a deep quietness that exists in your feeling body that is just really a beautiful, peaceful blissfulness and lovingness that ruminates through your being.
Yeah, thank you. You said you love my questions. I love your answers.
Good questions inspire good answers.
I often would hear a family member say, I'm a Christian, I don't meditate, like if that's the devil. What's some of the biggest misunderstandings or misconceptions about meditation you can share with us?
Yeah, I reached out to 1,200 schools in our country to suggest that it might be good for me to come and inspire the students to meditate, to help them to improve their studies, their concentration capabilities, their sense of well-being, reduce their stress, and increase their happiness. Out of those 1,200 schools, not one of them took me up on that invitation. And in large part, many of that was because they felt it was conflicting to the religions of those schools. They were private schools, because I knew that the private schools would be able to afford my services. Not that I even mentioned any money. It was just like, I'm here to offer that. So I started with the private schools. I thought they might be a bit more open. The public schools kind of have a bit more of a resistance to bringing in new ideas and new programs. They've got their curriculum, whereas the private schools I thought might be a little bit more open, but not one of them did. And that's large part, a lot of them reported back to me that they have their existing religion. And unfortunately, they saw that this scientifically backed process of optimizing the human experience was in some way conflicting with their religious beliefs, which of course is just unfortunately part of the ignorance that we're currently existing with on the planet, which is causing so much of the mayhem and disease, is that we're resisting using these beautiful tools that have stood the test of time, that have no religious connection or affiliation. They're just a simple process that can really help optimize the human experience. And we've got Ray Dalio, the world's largest hedge fund manager, tweeting that the key and the most significant ingredient that he contributes and attributes to his success is meditation. Oprah Winfrey said, it is only from that place can you create your best work and your best life. And she's talking about that place of stillness. So having a conscious state of stillness is so powerful on every single level of your life. And yet we have a deep sense of correlation at the moment still between that and some form of religious overlap, and it's just not the case. And hopefully over time, and I'm sure over time, we'll start to see that that anomaly or that misinformation start to melt away. So that's one, obviously, that there's some form of religious connection to it, which is not the case. It can be if you want to be, but it doesn't have to be. I think the other thing is time. A lot of people really struggle with time. And they say, I don't have time to meditate. And I said, well, you have time to go to a doctor when you're stressed. You have time not to go to work because you're hungover or exhausted. You have time to, not be able to see your family because you're really ill. You have time to get completely out of it by going to the pub and getting wasted. So we have time. It's just a different allocation of priorities and preferences with our time at the moment. We're really good at scrolling through our phones. We're really good at shopping. We're really good at drinking alcohol. We're really good at gambling. We're really good at betting on the horses. We're really good at watching sport. It's just that we have different priorities and different preferences in our world currently at the moment. So again, that's another myth that we need to bust. The final one is financial. Sometimes some of these things we need to pay the professional for the service that they're offering, that they've studied hard and spent lots of money and time becoming qualified in that. And we'll pay a plumber to come to a house and fix our pipes. We'll pay a carpenter, we'll pay an electrician, we'll pay a travel agent for the tickets to our plane, we'll pay an airline for the tickets to our plane. We're always making exchanges of value for things that add value to our life. We spend a lot of money on drugs, drinking, gambling, Netflix, Spotify, ice cream, all these things. You go to a supermarket, 90% of the food in those aisles has no nutritional value, no beneficial value in the health and well-being. They're just purely pleasure seeking again, but we spend lots of money on those things. What we need to do is reassess our allocation of funds into things that are core values, which is giving us health and happiness. And at the moment, we're not valuing health and happiness as much as we are valuing pleasure. So really reassessing where we allocate our funds and what we're allocating our funds to.
I was thinking the oligarchy or the 1% don't want us. They don't want healthy people. They need us sick.
That's a whole other conversation, my friend.
When you were saying that,
that's a rabbit hole we could go down. Yeah.
Yeah. So a documentary. You came out with the documentary, or you making one?
Yeah, we made a film called The Portal. The portal really is the portal being the portal of meditation. We're going through a portal into another realm, a realm that is beyond physical form, beyond phenomenal form, into the absolute, into the unmanifest, into the divine. And so that film's out. People were gifting that film to the world now. We tried to make it a financial success. We just really struggled. Maybe it wasn't the right time for the world. It just didn't seem to cut it into the mainstream, the masses, for a number of reasons maybe. So at this stage, it's a gift to the world, and they can go to entertheportal.com to watch that. And we filmed 6 personal stories that had gone through crisis and then managed to liberate themselves and find a way out of that crisis by using meditation. And we also have 3 futurists in the film that are looking at where humanity has been, the macro picture, and where humanity could potentially be going. And we present this idea that there are 2 paths that we can go down from this moment on. One is to extinction and self-termination as a species, and there's a high probability that we will walk down that path, and we're getting closer to it every day. Even the doomsday clock moved to the closest it's ever been to midnight, which is, I think, 2.5 minutes or 2 minutes to midnight. The other path that we're going down, which is really exciting, and people like you with your podcast and the work that you're doing are going to help facilitate that, and that is to move towards an enlightened planet where we as a species live in an incredible state of harmony, not just with each other, completely transcendent of our political, religious and racial differences, gender differences, and find a deeper sense of harmony, of coexistence on the planet with such kindness and care and support and tenderness for each other, but also for the planet as well, where we no longer treat the planet as a place for commoditization and extraction. At the moment, we humans see that thing there, which is called the planet, as a place for extraction, commoditization, and economics. And so, an enlightened planet is where humans recalibrate and reposition themselves back into equilibrium, because we can't exist without the fungi. We can't exist without the bees. We can't exist without so many aspects of the planet that at this stage we are very negligent about the importance of them, because we've become very narcissistic and superior in our attitude as this sort of, let's just rape and pillage what we can off the planet. It's not going to end well if we don't recalibrate and reassess our position on the planet.
Yeah, thank you. So how can we find you about your teachings, your classes, your retreats, and your books?
Yeah, the best and easiest place is to go to 2 places. One is tomcronin.com, my website, and the other one is Tom Cronin, my Instagram. And I love hearing from people. Anyone can reach out and send me a message. If they think I've just said a whole load of baloney and they can't stand what I have to say, I'd love to hear from them. That's all good. I respect their viewpoint and welcome that. If they like what I have to say, they can reach out to me as well, and we can have a chat. So come to Instagram or my website.
Yeah, thank you. Paramahansa Yogananda once said, the kingdom of heaven is behind the darkness of our eyelids, and the first gate that opens is peace. Thank you for coming on the show.
What a beautiful quote. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. It's been great to be here, and thank you everyone for sharing space with us and joining us today. It's been wonderful to be with you all.